Number 1. I remember as a child always being afraid. My mother had lived in this house for 20 plus years. I am now 19. When I turned 7, my mother's stalker killed himself. He had tried to kill her, rape her, abuse her. Thankfully, he hung himself. His name was Bobby. Like I said, when I was younger, I was living in fear. Not because of the house, but how my mother felt. I could pick up her energy. She was convinced Bobby was still there, but now he was in our house as a ghost, a lost spirit. At a young age, I remember my mother turning on the light in the hallway when she used the bathroom. She'd leave the door open late at night. I don't know now if she did this to protect us or to feel more safe. My bunk bed was right next to the door. I woke up every time she used the bathroom late at night. She would tell me to be quiet. I remember the shadow passing over my door in the hall. That is my best memory. My mother tells me stories of how the stereo would turn itself on, how my mother's hair would be played with, and things along that line. When I was in high school, we moved out. The day after, I was on a date and my mother picked me up. She said that our cabinets opened and slammed shut. That sound is irreplaceable. I didn't believe her because the hauntings only lasted the month of April every year, the month Bobby killed himself. Plus, the activity had stopped when I was around 10. Nothing had happened for years. The very next day, I was in the kitchen on the computer, and a bottle of nail polish flew up about a foot and then landed in a kitchen chair about 2 feet away. I watched this happen. I was shocked. I thought, well, maybe the wind caught it perfectly. The kitchen fan is always on. So I picked it up to find 3 3-inch nail polish bottles in the box. I put it back where it was and ran off to my mother's room. Over the next month, things would pick up. Things would fall and break, disappear, and you could sense it. But things got worse. It got so bad, my mother asked me to stay in her room at night with her. So for a whole summer, I slept in her bed with her. We avoided staying up too late. One night, we stayed up late watching the good old shows. 3 a.m. came around. I decided I wanted to take some photos. I peeked out of her room and took photos. There were orbs in every photo. We cleaned regularly. It couldn't be dust. So we started staying up late nights to take photos. My mother felt something. She said it was Bobby. She would tell me how she could feel it touch her, and she could sense it. Since my family were believers in God, I required everyone to wear a cross. Nothing cheaply made. I was not so strong of a believer, so I had a thin black ribbon with a small silver cross on it. One night, I couldn't breathe. The necklace seemed to put a weight on my chest. I ripped it off. Weeks went by. My mother woke with the feeling that someone was staring at her. I was staying at my dad's, and my little brother was staying in my mom's bed that night. She recalls waking up to Ryan laying on his side, his face directly above her. He was speaking some kind of language she didn't know. We only speak English. A week later, I stayed in her bed, and the same thing happened. I have long hair, and she said I was looking directly down at her from 3 inches from her face. None of my hair was touching her. Like my little brother, she pushed me back, and that was the end of it. When my mother's new husband moved in, we told him what was happening. He never believed us. The activity stopped. I believe it to be a long while later, the activity picked back up. We would tell my stepdad about it, but he wouldn't listen. The day was coming to an end, and we were watching a movie. Russ, my stepdad, said his head hurt, so I snapped a photo. In the photo, an orb was right next to his head. He ran off, and I snapped another. In this one, it moved towards my mother. She claims to see faces in the orbs, but she's the only one who does. She sees the same face in different photos. We started hearing this squeak noise, like a dog toy. Our dogs didn't fall for it. They would look up toward the noise, then lay right back down. Could it have wanted to hurt them or fool them as a joke? Just recently, I moved out and my mother called me with news. My mother was watching her new grandson when she caught an orb on video. She said she wasn't afraid. Today she called to tell me that while watching the baby, one of his noisy toys went off. Then she found that that exact toy was taken by the baby's mother while dropping him off. She freaked out and called me. Things still happen to this day. We all have our opinions, but I believe in the supernatural and the paranormal. I have felt it, seen it, and witnessed it. Thank you for listening to my story. Number 2. This is kind of weird because even just talking about it out loud makes my throat feel tight and the words get difficult. It's not something that frightens me, but it's something that triggers a very deep emotional response in me, so it's so specific and difficult to explain. It's 100% true, but maybe won't sound it, which is okay. Believe it or not, I just wanted to see if anyone had any similar experiences. So, a couple of years ago, my friend who lives overseas told me a very sad story about how the night her grandpa died, her mom had a nightmare that she was watching the outside of their house, and her father, friend's grandpa, was outside banging on the windows and doors, trying to get in, while tendrils of ivy covered the whole exterior of the house, keeping him out. When she woke with a start from the nightmare, she knew he was dead, and got a call from the hospice an hour later to tell her. I told my mom about this during one of our fun little chats about the paranormal, what we believe and don't believe, just as an interesting and sad story, as my mom feels her grandma visits her quite often in dreams. Also, when her own father was dying of cancer, she was woken by him shouting her name, and got a phone call soon after to say he had passed. This is super common and nothing to write home about, but quite moving. When I told her about the ivy dream, she started laughing because she was so freaked out, and when it subsided, was finally able to tell me that when her best friend had breast cancer years ago, when she was at her weakest, and it was touch and go on whether the chemo was going to save her or kill her, she had pneumonia at this point, she fell asleep in her bedroom and had a vivid dream of ivy covering the inside of her room and body. She told my mom she thought in the dream, "This is it then, I'm done." In the dream, her father, who had just died 2 years before, came running into her room and pulled the ivy off her, and it retreated out of the windows, at which point she woke up. That was the worst point of her fight with cancer, and from there she improved and is now fine and cancer-free. I just wanted to share these 2 dreams that occurred separately to 2 people who will never know each other on opposite sides of the world. I'm not saying it's definitely paranormal, but it's so specific that it makes my hair stand up on end when I think about it. Later on, my mom's friend had another dream where her son was trying to get in the house, which was again being covered with ivy, and woke up terrified, only to find he was perfectly fine and it was just a bad dream. I dreamt a few months back that ivy was creeping through my window to get me, but again, it was just a bad dream. I am, knock on wood, still alive. So anyway, that's that. Weird, interesting, creepy, awesome, ivy death dreams. Number 3. A close friend of mine lives in southern Japan. She has always maintained that she doesn't believe in ghosts or spirits, but the other night she called me and told me she had seen something that made her question that. My friend, let's call her Rika, was visiting Kikai Island in Kagoshima Prefecture, Japan, and was hanging out with a friend there. He told her he had heard that certain areas on the island, including a nearby beach, were haunted. They decided to take a walk over to the beach because they had time to kill, and even if Rika didn't believe in ghosts, it would still be a nice walk. It was about 9 p.m. As they were walking down this little path by the beach, sand with tall grass on either side and very little light, Rika said she didn't think that ghosts or spirits were real. Right then, she noticed two figures on the path they were on, backs turned, walking ahead. These figures were totally black, which she didn't immediately think was strange because it was dark out and they could have been wearing hoodies. She said she thought at first they were high school students walking around, and she got the impression that they were both girls. Her friend also saw them, and they said a few words about how it was strange how they were all in black. Then, when Rika turned back, the two shapes merged into one long black figure and, as she said, kind of stretched into the sky and floated away. Her companion saw this as well. They were both very freaked out and decided to leave. On the phone, she told me she got the distinct impression that the figures were close to each other, like sisters, she imagined, and that they had no interest in Rika and her friend. She was still really scared by the whole experience. CreepyMina here of the Worst Nightmare Channel. I hope you enjoyed those 3 women's paranormal stories of a haunted house, Ivy death dreams, and shadow people. If you would like to hear your story narrated on this channel or another horror channel, there are 3 ways this can be done. If you have made a submission to Let's Not Meet or the Paranormal subreddit, just make a note at the top that you allow permission for it to be read on one of these channels, or submit your story to the new subreddit WillingStories, where copyright is not a problem, or send your story to me, CreepyMina, at gmail.com to specifically appear on this channel. Please comment, give me a thumbs up, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget to stay safe.